If we strip away trend and branding, somatics is the study and the training of the lived body as the primary organization system of human behavior. The body as architecture, not a brain taxi. Every human being operates through structure, skeletal alignment, muscle tone, breath rhythm, attentional patterning. Those elements are not secondary to psychology. They generate it. The way that you stand shapes the way that you perceive. The way that you perceive is revealed in the way that you stand. So it goes both ways. The way you breathe shapes how you interpret risk. The way you approach risk will show up in your breath. The way you distribute tension shapes the decisions that you believe are available. That is somatics in its mature form. The recognition that perception, identity, and action arise from embodied organization, both consciously and subconsciously. Before we go further, there's something really useful here. The way that you interpret somatics and what I'm going to share next will be shaped by your main operating pattern. All of us fall into one of 4 main nervous system defaults, especially under pressure. We are going to give you yours in our 2-minute Somatic Skins Quiz. So pause this, go down to the description, and take that quiz. It will show you how your system tends to organize under pressure, whether you default towards force as the warrior, fluidity as the shapeshifter, analysis as the sage, or composure as the asset, and then how those tendencies shape how you move, lead, think, and see in the world. Knowing your filter will help everything I'm going to share next land more personally. Okay, so somewhere along the way, the field of somatics drifted towards a blur of science and pseudoscience, mainstream unvetted hype or big claims mixed with neuroscience. And I don't think that the drift came from bad intention. It came from enthusiasm, interest. The nervous system entered the cultural conversation. Trauma-informed language entered the mainstream. People started feeling more, or rather they noticed what they were feeling more, naming it more. And in many circles, sensation, what we sense and feel, quietly became the main goal. Look, there is nothing wrong with sensation. We all got it. Sensation is data, and it's essential. But just observing and analyzing sensation is not the same thing as development. In fact, sensation without scaffolding and structural development may not even be the most accurate place to start. Because when your posture is collapsed, or your muscular skeletal system is weak, or your breath is detrained or destabilized, the nervous system can't produce a clean signal. It'll produce noise or intensity. It will produce compelling internal weather. And that weather or intensity or emotional signal can feel meaningful and it can feel deep, but depth is not the same thing as precision. The body cannot feel clearly what it cannot hold. All right, join me for some tea today. It's actually coffee. This is a candid conversation between you and me on the topic of a body-first approach, somatics. Stability precedes sensitivity. If the system cannot withstand load, it cannot differentiate signal from overwhelm. If breath is erratic, sensation is colored by threat physiology. If attention is unstable, awareness fragments, and we call that fragmentation insight still. And this is where what I will playfully coin neuro-nonsense creeps in. We begin labeling or even chasing states of being without building capacity. We begin explaining the amygdala without training the organism. We begin optimizing for calm rather than for coherence in complexity. And because the language sounds clinical, it feels legitimate. But naming a neural structure does not change anything. It doesn't reorganize a nervous system. Intentional repetition under demand with tools and training organizes a nervous system. Pressure reveals your system, and time under tension reorganizes it. This is not controversial in athletics. It's not controversial in martial arts. It's not controversial in dance or high-level music training. But somehow, in somatic coaching, we started believing that insight alone produces transformation, and it doesn't. And this matters, especially depending on your skin. If you are sage leaning, you may understand nervous system theory beautifully. You can narrate your patterns, you can map them, but if structure hasn't changed, your behavior under pressure will also not change. If you are a shapeshifter, you may feel everything and you are exquisitely sensitive to group dynamics or social nuance, but without architecture, that fluidity of responsiveness can become volatility or even leaving dynamics where staying would have been of value. If you are warrior leaning, you may overtrain intensity and dismiss subtlety entirely, building force without refinement. And if you are an asset or an empath, you may present calm composure, energetic sensitivity, while suppressing activation or keeping yourself only in calm environments in a way that never really integrates or impacts in a broader sense. My point is that different skins distort somatics in different ways, and that's why diagnostics matter. The correction is then in developmental sequencing. In a general sense, it's gross before subtle, structure before nuance, load before refinement. Classical systems understood this very well. Shaolin training, for example, did not begin with internal energy work. It began with stance under gravity. Yoga, not the modern kind, the old kind, did not begin with meditation. It began with forms. Internal martial systems that are often romanticized as soft begin with tendon conditioning, alignment, repetition under demand, until the body becomes coherent in its conversation. These systems were not anti-sensitive. They understood that subtle awareness can emerge more accurately when the organism is organized and trained enough to produce reliable sensation and interpretation. Here are a couple examples. When the hips are loaded under tension, the cortex can then update its map. When the spine transmits force cleanly, even under fatigue, proprioception can shift and sharpen. When breath stabilizes structure under demand, our interoception then refines. The sensory ability expands where use demands precision. Untrained regions remain unrepresented. In other words, you cannot feel what you have not mapped. As we say, trying to sense more without motor patterning is like trying to read without an alphabet. Pressure becomes the teacher because pressure removes narrative, conceptual explanations. Under load, compensation becomes obvious. Breath cannot fake depth or regulation. Attention cannot pretend to be stable, not under pressure. The feedback loop tightens until the system reorganizes out of necessity. And from that reorganization, subtlety emerges. Not because you tried harder to feel accurately, but because your organism can now just differentiate. We go more into this in our books, The Somatic Skins and Becoming the Grand Formidable, both of which are linked below in the description. In those books, we break down capacity versus perception, load versus subtlety, and how motor engrams and cortical mapping actually create the conditions for refined awareness. But you don't need theory to understand this. You can test it. What shape does your posture hold in disagreement? Can your breath remain organized and accessible while you speak under pressure and conflict? Can you feel activation or charge without collapsing or lashing out or becoming flooded? Can you distinguish fear from your inner wisdom in real time? Can you stay relational while transmitting force or ferocity? If the answer is consistent, then the issue is not lack of insight, it's lack of architecture. Somatic intelligence is not just about calming down. It's about coherence under intensity when it matters. A mature nervous system is not one that is always relaxed. It is one that can move through activation without losing structure. It can enter heat without fragmenting attention or soothing. It can recover quickly when disrupted. It can differentiate between signal and story. Subtle awareness is powerful. It's in our range of intelligence. Emotional attunement is powerful. We need it. Introspection is powerful. But they are powerful when your system can hold them and wield them well. Without architecture, subtlety overwhelms. Without architecture, it becomes unusable. That is reclaiming. So, in summary, I love this field. We have geeked out about bodies, minds, human consciousness for decades. For us, somatics is the training of embodied organization, accessed especially in moments that matter. Sensation is data. It isn't necessarily just skill or gospel truth. Embodied capacity must precede accurate perception. Pressure is developmental, not a pathological label to avoid. Subtlety emerges from structure. And so your skin, your particular nervous system pattern can give you a place to start. Why does this matter? Because without this clarity, you're going to continue to chase experiences instead of build demonstrable capacity. You'll accumulate insight almost like dopamine hits without actual changes of behavior. You become sensitive, but without the structures that allow it to be expressed as strength. And that fragility will show up in your leadership, in your business, in intimacy, in creativity, and in decision-making under risk. If you are looking for a body-first approach, start by asking, where in my life am I actually training sensitivity, focus, structure, and fluidity under load? And don't come at me for this honest question, but if you are a coach or a somatic professional, are you increasing your client's actual capacity? And how is that being demonstrated measurably? Or are you just increasing their vocabulary or looping in emotive or insight states without demonstrable integration? Sequence determines transformation, so structure, stamina, then subtleties. The body must be built before it can lead well. If our approach resonates with you and you've taken the Skins Quiz, that's a great place to start. But if you want to train this in community, not as theory, but as applied developmental practice, join us for a season in the Prestige. This is particularly relevant for experienced somatic professionals. If that's you, we want you here. This is where the work lives in real time, under real relational pressure, targeted simulation, and high-level support with feedback. Your work will never be the same. If you have made it this far in the video, thank you so much. Please do consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you next time.